The astronauts were awakened shortly after 3 a.m. They posted the traditional breakfast photograph and then drove out to the launch pad along the same route followed by many crews in the past. The 5 men, headed by Commander Coates, then began climbing inside Discovery. The main task of this mission will be the launch of a big communication satellite. The astronauts will also be studying the growth in space of plants, chicken embryos, and rats with broken bones.
Deborah, the reason that the astronauts were wearing suits during the breakfast was a little bit of a joke. They said things were getting a little bit too formal around here, so they wanted to make them really formal. That shows what this countdown has been like. There's really no problems at all. It looks like they're going to get it off this morning, but of course a lot can happen, and we'll be here at 8:07, the scheduled launch time. Deborah?
Bob, this tracking satellite is really critical to NASA's plan of having routine shuttle flight, is it not?
That's right. There's 2 of them up there already. There'll be a total of 4 eventually, and when that happens, we won't have this loss of signal during a shuttle mission when they'll go out of contact with ground stations. They'll be able to talk to the Earth all the time and send data down all the time.
All right, Bob Bazell at Cape Canaveral. Launch is set for 8:07 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. We'll keep you posted.
The Space Shuttle Discovery is poised for liftoff. The weather is clear, the countdown... Good morning, I'm Terrence Smith.
And I'm Lynn Brown. Charles Osgood and Faith Mills are on vacation. It is Monday, March 13th. Leading our news, it is looking good for an on-time launch of the Space Shuttle Discovery after a nearly flawless final cut-down.
At the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Discovery is fueled and its crew is ready for the first shuttle mission of 1989. Standing by at the Space Center with the latest, Eric Engberg. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Terry. The weather here at the launch site after a weekend that was windy in Florida is now nearly perfect, and the countdown is moving along smartly without any problem. The flight crew already scored 1 first for NASA, showing up for pre-dawn breakfast in coats and ties. But then they got into the real business suits of the day, the pressure garments designed for use in the event of a launch emergency. The commander, Navy Captain Mike Coates, is on his 2nd flight. There are 3 rookies in his 5-man crew. After suiting, it was into the van for the trip to Pad 39, where the ice team was completing its inspection for any ice left over from the loading of supercooled fuel into the external tank. The crew started into the Discovery cabin about 45 minutes ago. One problem did crop up this morning, Terry, that was kind of interesting, although it will not delay the launch. You'll remember that after the Challenger disaster, one of the changes that was made in the solid rocket booster system was a heater system designed to prevent it from getting cold and destroying the ability of the O-rings to seal the joint. Well, one of those heaters failed overnight during the countdown. It failed, ironically enough, at the very same joint where the Challenger accident began, the number 3 aft field joint. But there is a backup heater designed to move in, and at any rate, weather conditions, cold weather, won't be a factor, so the heater failure is not a constraint to the launch.
Eric, thank you. What is the mission of this dapper coat and tie mission? What are they trying to accomplish?
This crew will be in space for 5 days, and the most important goal will be accomplished during the first 6 hours of the mission, and that will be to launch a TDRS relay satellite, which is a communication satellite. It is a key part of NASA's system designed to keep satellites and other shuttles in communication with ground stations, both voice communication and computers.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric Engberg.
Good morning. You're looking at a live shot from Cape Canaveral where fog is enshrouding Launch Pad 39B and the Space Shuttle Discovery. Our 5-man crew is already aboard, making final preparations for a liftoff. A little more than an hour from now, you can see the hatch being sealed. A key data and tracking satellite in the cargo bay represents the most important objective of this flight. The fog is causing some concern, but Discovery is ready to go today, Monday, March the 13th, 1989.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryce Gumbel and Jane Pauley.
Good morning. Welcome back from a weekend. Welcome to Today on a Monday morning, a busy Monday, one highlighted by the expected liftoff of the Shuttle Discovery. We will, of course, have live coverage of that liftoff. It is scheduled for 8:07 Eastern Time. We're going to move to John Palmer in a little bit. He's going to give us more from the news desk, including a live update from the Cape. Let's press ahead to the news desk. And start the morning with John Palmer. Good morning, John. Good morning.
Canaveral, where the final countdown, as Bryant reported, had been going smoothly for the launch of Space Shuttle Discovery, but now there is a last-minute weather problem. Science correspondent Robert Bazell is at the Cape. He's got the latest. Bob, good morning.
Good morning, John. As you can see, and as you've seen in the pictures already this morning, it's foggy here in Central Florida. We just got word from Mission Control that they are going to hold the countdown clock at T-minus 9 minutes for an indeterminate time to wait for this fog to burn off. Now, the problem is that when the fog burns off, it's going to start getting more windy. So we'll be watching the weather very closely here all morning. Now, behind me, out on pad 39B, the 5 astronauts are in their seats and ready to go.
Commanded by Michael Coates in the middle, showed up for the traditional breakfast in business suits. This was a tongue-in-cheek response to some new NASA policies that the astronauts were supposed to behave more formally. After that, they put on the pressure suits that they will wear during ascent and left for the pad. The main goal of this mission will be to launch a big communication satellite to be used during future space missions. The astronauts also will watch the growth in space of some plants, chicken embryos, and rats with broken bones.
There are no mechanical problems at all on Discovery, so this fog and possibly the winds later on are going to be the only problem. We're supposed to have a launch at 8:07. It can go as late as 10:48 Eastern Time. We'll be here. We'll let you know. John?
Thank you, Bob. Another
Yes, it is. Good morning, everyone. And this morning, the countdown is on for the launch of the Space Shuttle. Discovery, with a crew of 5 astronauts on board, is poised on the launch pad this morning. Liftoff scheduled for 8:07 Eastern Time, but that fog you see could delay the launch. This is the 3rd shuttle flight since the Challenger disaster, and this is the first of 7 missions planned for this year. CBS News will begin live coverage of the shuttle launch in about an hour at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And also this morning, coming...
Good morning, everyone. Leading our news this morning, the Space Shuttle Discovery, ready to go after an exceptionally smooth countdown. But NASA officials are now concerned about weather conditions. Peter Van Sant is at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Good morning, Peter. What's the latest?
Good morning, Terry. Well, NASA managers are now worried that this fog you can see behind me may cause a delay in this morning's launch, currently scheduled for 7 minutes past 8 Eastern Time. The weatherman is now saying there is a 60% chance that it will be too foggy to launch at 8 o'clock, but the conditions may improve to acceptable levels between 8:30 and 9. It's the first real snag to what has been a flawless countdown.
Launch pad 39B looked like a Hollywood premiere this morning, and so far, everything is going according to NASA's script.
A couple of problems the launch team was tracking earlier have been resolved. We're currently on schedule here in the countdown.
The 5 shuttle astronauts, led by Commander Michael Coates, wore their Sunday best to breakfast this morning. Later, the astronauts donned their bulky and uncomfortable pressure suits which could save their lives in the event of a ditching at sea. The shuttle's giant external tank has been filled with super-cold liquid oxygen and hydrogen. Around 6:30 this morning, the final astronaut was strapped into Discovery. About 6 hours after Discovery reaches orbit, the crew will release a $100 million data relay satellite called TDRS, which will dramatically improve communication between spacecraft and mission control. Once the satellite is up and working, NASA will begin phasing out its worldwide network of ground stations.
And there is another concern that when the fog burns off, surface winds may pick up, creating another potential delay for liftoff. NASA's plans right now are to hold at T-minus 9, wait for the weather to clear up, and hopefully Discovery will take flight sometime this morning. Terry?
Peter, what is the problem with the fog, since I assume that the shuttle simply rockets up through it?
The problem is that this is one of the emergency landing sites should something go wrong with the shuttle. They have to have clear weather so they can land here at the Kennedy Space Center in case of a problem, so fog is a major problem. We'll just have to wait for it to burn off.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter Van Sant.
Discovery, with its 5-member crew, is ready for liftoff this morning, but the weather has delayed the launch for at least, an hour. The trouble is fog surrounding the shuttle and the launch pad, as well as concerns that even if the fog does burn off, there could be additional problems with the wind. But liftoff could still come this morning up until 10:37 Eastern Time, when the launch window closes. In other news,
picture this morning. Welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Harry Smith.
And I'm Kathleen Sullivan.
And I'm Mark McEwen.
We're all kind of hanging around waiting for the shuttle to take off. We are about 30 minutes away from this morning's scheduled launch of the space shuttle, but fog could delay the liftoff. A lot of the fog's burned off so far, but Discovery and the crew of 5 astronauts scheduled to lift off on their 5-day mission at 8:07 Eastern Time. There is a hold in the launch countdown right now, but we're going to be keeping an eye on things at the Cape. And if the flight is not delayed, CBS News is going to have live coverage of the 3rd post-Challenger shuttle flight beginning at 8 this morning. Also this morning, the nation's war.
Good morning. It was looking like a great morning for a space shuttle launch till a Florida fog rolled in at the Kennedy Space Center. Eric Engberg is standing by there with the latest on the Discovery countdown. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Lynn. As you can see, the sun has come out and it's starting to warm up here at the Kennedy Space Center. Everything is progressing well with the shuttle itself. The principal concern now is the weather.
As the pad crew sealed the hatch on the 5-man Discovery crew, a thick layer of fog came rolling across the launch complex. NASA weather forecasters said it was expected to burn off quickly, and launch officials were ready to wait it out.
We do have a 500-foot thick layer of fog in the area here at Kennedy Space Center. Looks like it would probably take a couple of hours for that fog to lift for good visibility for launch today.
Another weather problem was the wind. Forecasters say that as the fog burns off, winds will increase, and that raises the possibility of a delay if the winds are strong enough to make an emergency landing at the launch site impossible.
The plan now, Lynn, is to get to the T-9 point in the count and then wait out the fog to see whether it burns off.
Eric, before we let you get away, how long can they remain in a holding pattern?
The best estimate is about an hour.
Thank you very much, Eric Engberg.
Oh, that's true, but you're a popcorn freak. Take a look at the Cape, where the fog is still causing some problems out at Launch Pad 39B. We understand from NASA that they are in a hold for extended duration, waiting for the fog to lift. We're looking at a delay. They're saying perhaps 35 to 40 minutes. Of course, it could be longer, and of course, when you live coverage when it goes. Now, because of Discovery's expected liftoff, we've got our own schedule juggled just a little bit. So let me go through this properly. For some of you, this will be the first hour. Take notes. And we'll be coming back. For others of you, this is a goodbye for this day. Either way, next thing on your docket is the station.
Sullivan.
And I'm Harry Smith. Good morning, everybody.
This morning's launch of the space shuttle is now being delayed. The countdown was supposed to have resumed a few minutes ago, but they are still holding at 9 minutes. Fog and winds are creating the problems at this very hour. We're going to keep an eye on the situation down at the Cape for you and bring the latest. Also, in just a couple minutes, Dave Hilmers and Michael Collins, 2 astronauts, will join us to explain what's going on now with the hold. Also this morning, actors
do is wait and hope that the weather improves enough for a shuttle launch. Peter Van Sant joins us with the latest. Peter, what have you got?
Well, good morning, Terry. We've got some pretty encouraging news. The latest weather forecast, which came in just minutes ago, predicts that NASA may be able to attempt to launch the shuttle Discovery between 8:30 and 9:30 Eastern Time. Weather has been the only significant problem this morning in what had been a near-perfect countdown.
Okay, we plan to get NASA test direction.
NASA's plans to launch the shuttle Discovery are literally in a fog this morning. The planned liftoff is being held up by ground fog and concern over growing winds.
We did get an indication that from the range safety officer that we were no-go because of for optical considerations with the fog as it is in the area.
Fog is a problem because should something go wrong, the shuttle may have to make an emergency landing here at the Kennedy Space Center. The 3-mile-long runway must be visible before the countdown can resume.
There is also concern that as the fog lifts, surface winds may increase, which could also force a postponement.
So right now we're keeping our fingers crossed. The countdown is stuck at T-minus 9 minutes in holding while NASA waits for the sun to burn off the fog. Terry?
Peter, you mentioned before a window between 8:30 and 9:30 Eastern Time. Is that the extent? Is that as long as they can wait?
No, they could go as late as 10:37 this morning. That's the launch window in which they could still make the proper orbit to deploy this very important satellite that they're going to put up, hopefully, today. So we still have some time to play with here.
So I take it hopes are high that they'll get up.
It is, and just glancing out the window here, we've seen a pretty good improvement in the fog out there, so hopes are high.
Okay. Peter Van Sant, thank you very much.
Morning. First, Cape Canaveral, where fog has put this morning's launch of the Space Shuttle Discovery on hold. NBC News science correspondent Robert Bazell is standing by there at the Cape. Bob, what's the situation now?
John, good morning. The situation is that the countdown is being held at the T-minus 9-minute mark. That's a convenient place because NASA technicians can pick it up there anytime and proceed to the launch. The problem, as you mentioned, is the fog. There's absolutely no mechanical problem. Launch Director Bob Speak just polled all the engineers, and everyone said there was nothing to prevent a launch. The fog is expected to lift, and this is, of course, a weather forecast. They'll try for the launch. So one problem is that as the fog lifts, it can get more windy, and that, too, could prevent a launch. So we're watching the weather very closely. John?
Thank you, Bob. And when it happens, and if it happens, we'll bring it to you live on NBC News.
Well, fog and wind are delaying the launch of the Space Shuttle Discovery this morning. Joining us now to talk about the mission, former astronaut Michael Collins, who joins us this morning from Washington, D.C., and from the Kennedy Space Center, astronaut Dave Hilmers. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good to be here.
David, your mission last September went through a similar situation, you know, with numerous holds and delays. How does it compare? How serious is today's delay?
I think that we'll see a clearing. The only constraint that we have right now is just this fog to burn off. As soon as that happens, we can go. We had a problem with upper-level winds during our launch, and this doesn't appear to be a constraint for this launch. So I think that as soon as this fog burns off, we're going to see a liftoff this morning.
How long do you think? A half hour?
I'm not a fortune teller, but I'd say a half an hour to 45 minutes, given the clearing pattern that we've had so far.
Mike, how come weather so often causes delays? Is there any way to get around it to have a successful shuttle program?
Well, it's a tough problem, Kathleen, because you have to have the weather be good not only at Cape Kennedy, but also in North Africa, which is the once around abort site, and then also out in California where the shuttle will come down. So the weather really has to cooperate all the way around the globe in order to get the shuttle off.
Dave, you were up there last September when everyone was waiting to get a shuttle up in the air again. There are a bunch of rookies on this flight this time. What do you think is going through their minds as they sit on that pad?
Well, whether they're rookies or not, one thing I'm sure that's going through their minds is the fact that let's just get off our backs, let's get into space, let's get this thing going. It gets fairly uncomfortable right about this point, and they're probably squirming around a little bit on their backs, and they really wish for the launch to go.
Well, Mike, the delays actually put certain parts of this mission in jeopardy, don't they? I know there's going to be a satellite tracking, or a satellite that's going to be launched, as well as the Venus probe. How long can this shuttle take a delay until those two projects get in trouble?
Well, I think they can, if they have to scrub, I don't think they will. I'm an optimist. I think they'll get off this morning, but if they should have to scrub, they can delay it several days before the launch pad becomes needed for a higher priority flight, which will be the next flight in line.
What is it? Give us a kind of a barometric pressure reading on NASA these days. We've gotten a couple of shuttles up successfully. There's some pressure to get TDRS off today, and the Venus, as you just mentioned, and the next shuttle flight. Give us a reading. Are things going well? Is the mood good? Are things good at NASA these days? And maybe we can take one from the inside and one from a little safe distance. Go ahead, Mike.
I think they are, Harry. I think it's a very interesting year coming up for NASA. We have not only this flight this morning, but coming up there's a probe going to Venus, and later on this Hubble Space Telescope will be a magnificent machine to have in orbit. It'll allow astronomers to see out into the far corners of the universe, to see things that humans have never experienced before. So we'll be getting in a tremendous flood of information by the end of this year about space and about this universe that we live in.
But Dave, there must be pressure right now to get this shuttle on track, to prove to the American public that, yes, we can get them up when we say we do, and that they're not going to be interminable delays. There are some people who suggest that if this one doesn't get off the ground, that it really puts the whole shuttle program in trouble.
I think that might be overstating a little bit. I think the mood is very operational at NASA. We're very safety conscious, but yet I look in the astronaut office, see all the flights that we have in front of us. A lot of people have been assigned to flights, new astronauts that haven't flown before. The mood is very upbeat, and we're confident in the future.
Dave, there was some problem with this shuttle. Was there not some technical kind of motor problems? And didn't they have to cannibalize Columbia a little bit to, from one to take care of the other?
there was what's called a master events controller, which has some very critical functions attached to it. That part was cannibalized from Columbia, if you want to use that word. Given the extraordinary number of parts that on a vehicle, some of that replacement of parts is to be expected.
Wasn't there a complaint, though, during the when the Challenger was reviewed and some of the problems with NASA? One of the complaints, wasn't it, that there was too much cannibalization from shuttle to shuttle in order to get flight off after flight off? Is there any concern that there's a beginning of a trend again that might be dangerous?
We want to avoid cannibalization whenever possible, and that is not the right way to go about business. What you want to have is a large supply of parts that you're able to call upon in case of a contingency such as that, and a buildup of supply of these type of parts is something that we strive for, but there may be instances when that's impossible.
Dave Hilmers, Mike Collins, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll get off within the next half hour. It's now 15 past the hour, and coming up next, actress Mercedes Ruehl. She's been on a roll ever since.
Welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Harry Smith.
And I'm Kathleen Sullivan.
NASA is still waiting for the weather to clear down at the launch site of the launch of the Space Shuttle Discovery. This morning, fog shrouded the Cape. Once it burns off, NASA is hoping the upper-level winds do not pick up, and we will keep you updated on the launch.
Leading our news, it is T-minus 9 minutes and holding at the Kennedy Space Center, where Discovery is poised for the first shuttle flight of 1989. The only problem, the weather. Eric Engberg joins us now from the Space Center. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Lynn. The hold that we're now has been underway for about 40 minutes. The problem is fog. The fog is burning off. And about 10 minutes ago, we got this word from the Launch Control Center and NASA's Lisa Malone.
This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 9 minutes and holding. We just received a weather briefing here between Launch Director here in the Launch Control Center at Kennedy and Flight Directors in Houston. The weather is expected to improve in about the next 40 minutes.
So that would give us a situation in which we could launch, let's say, within the next half hour to an hour, and NASA is looking forward to that. There are no problems with the equipment or the crew, all set to go except for the fog. Lynn?
Thank you very much for the update, Eric.
Jane, good morning again. The Space Shuttle Discovery remains on the launch pad this morning at Cape Canaveral, where NASA managers are waiting for the fog to lift. This morning's scheduled liftoff delayed, but NASA still hopes for launch later this morning. NBC News science correspondent Robert Bazell has more now from the Cape. What's the situation now, Bob?
John, it's going very quiet here at the Kennedy Space Center. There's very little conversation going on between Launch Control and the 5 astronauts who are on board the Discovery, and it's because there's not much to say. There's no mechanical problems. The only problem is the weather, the fog. The weather forecasters expect it to lift in about a half an hour, and they think that they'll come out of the T-minus 9 minutes hold and go then. But, of course, that's a weather forecast. The winds are also a problem. They're watching the winds, but so far it looks like there could be a launch when the fog lifts in about a half hour. But, of course, we have to wait and see, and we'll be here live when it happens. John?
Okay, Bob, thanks.
Janet, looking with uncertainty towards Cape Canaveral. We can punch up a picture from down there. You'll see that Shuttle Discovery is still on the pad at launch 39B, launch pad 39B. We understand now officials there are waiting for word on high-altitude winds. If they get the white weather report, they will resume their count. It is now in a hold at T-minus 9. Either way, when it goes, if it goes, we're going to be here. The window allowing it to go lasts until 10:37 Eastern. For some of you, we'll come back in just a bit. For others of you, this is a goodbye until tomorrow. Either way, next up,
Deborah Norville. The launch of the Shuttle Discovery is back on. The shuttle is fueled. It has been on launch pad 39B at Cape Canaveral all morning, and the crew is on board, and now Mother Nature is cooperating to make possible the launch of the Shuttle Discovery, the first launch for the shuttle program during 1989. The shuttle launch window opened at 8:07 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, but because of problems with the winds and fog in the area, the launch was put on nearly a 2-hour hold. There was about a 500-foot thick cloud of fog covering the launch site, which made it difficult for the shuttle to return back to
Cape Kennedy should an emergency landing be necessary. The crew has been on board the shuttle inside the orbiter since about 5:30 this morning Eastern Time. It is probably getting uncomfortable for them, but the systems are all been checked out and the weather conditions are such that a launch is now possible. NBC science correspondent Bob Bazell is at Cape Canaveral this morning, along with Al O'Hara, who is a former launch director for the shuttle program, and both have been on board for a number of these launches. Bob, good morning.
Good morning, Deborah. Everything is going very well this morning, except for the weather, which has gone away. Al, this is one of the smoothest countdowns we've had in a long time, isn't it?
It has been very smooth. We're really looking forward to a great launch.
One of the things that happened was that the crew was getting a little antsy out there. They were giving the launch director, Bob Seek, a lot of trouble this morning.
They were. It's a little unusual, but I guess they're anxious to go, and so was everyone else.
Okay, so the only problem was the weather. We're coming up now on T-minus 4 minutes. The ground launch sequencer, which is a computer, is taking over and it's giving all the commands.
That's correct, right.
Now, one of the key moments that we always look for in a launch is that we move towards T-minus 31 seconds. At that moment, the computer that's on board the Discovery will take over and give all the commands. The 5-man crew is standing by. A lot of things are automatic now. This is all by the book, right?
That's right. They're sitting there waiting for everything to take place, and liftoff will be automatic unless they're just stopped for some reason.
One of the things, Deborah, that's happening this morning is that the voice of launch control for the first time in history of the space program is a woman named Lisa Malone, who works for NASA's Public Affairs Office. We might listen to her for a second. Well, she's not saying anything right now, but we see the countdown moving up on 3 minutes now. That's the main engines there.
3 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting. We are
right now
transferring to internal power and switching off the orbiter's ground support equipment power bus. At this point, Discovery is running off its onboard fuel cells.
A minute ago, you saw the engines moving around there. That's a routine test to see that the engines can move properly.
Yes, Bob, to make sure that all the automatic equipment is operating properly, and when it lifts off, the engines will be able to operate right. All automatic.
You've been in charge of this a few times. What's going through your mind when you're making the decisions to whether to launch?
Nervous, anxious, hope it's successful, pray that it will be. And that's how we are.
Deborah, we should also point out that this is the first launch of this year and the first of 7 of a very ambitious schedule, including 3 very important science missions. This particular flight will carry a $100 million communications satellite, which is crucial for the rest of the space program. It's called the Tracking Data and Relay Satellite. There's also some biology experiments on board to measure the growth of chicken embryos and plants and rats that have artificially broken legs to see if bones will hear in space. That's the beanie that you see coming off the top of the external tank now. That's the thing that puts the liquid hydrogen and oxygen into the huge external tank. That's the main fuel, along with the solid fuel that's in the booster rockets. Everything going exactly according to plan.
Bob, I understand that Mr. O'Hara has been part of many of these missions before, as you mentioned. It struck me today that there seemed to be an awful lot of consultation with not only the people from NASA, but also officials from some of the companies that are involved with some of these scientific experiments. There was a group decision to go ahead with this launch.
That's right. It's always a group decision, and even more so now since the Challenger disaster. Right? They're taking a lot more precautions, a lot more people thinking harder about these things.
Absolutely. Nothing has remained uncovered. They want to bring everything to the surface, make a conscious decision to go or no go. Very different.
But as we said, the only problem this morning was the weather. The weather this morning was very foggy here at Cape Canaveral. It's now a beautiful day here.
Now for the launch of Discovery and its 5-member crew.
About a minute away for the ground computers to give the orbiter computers the go-ahead and take over.
That's right. We're going to listen from now on, Deborah, but that is the crucial moment to watch, is that T-minus 31 seconds.
T-minus 1 minute, the heaters on the booster joints will be deactivated.
Minus 1 minute.
Just seconds away now from liftoff of Discovery. All systems are go. Coming up on T-minus 31 seconds. We have a go for auto sequence start. Discovery's 4 redundant computers have primary control of critical vehicle functions for the remainder of the count. T-minus 20 seconds.
15 seconds.
T-minus 13, 12, 11, 10. We have a go for main engine start. 6, 5. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1. SRB ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-29 as Discovery clears the tower.
Roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Mission Control, Houston. Good roll program confirmed. Engines now at 65%. Standing by for the go at throttle up call.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
Roger, go at throttle up.
Mission Control, that call means all systems are performing well as the shuttle main engines have resumed their firing at 104% of rated thrust. Relative velocity now 2,400 feet per second. Climbing at a rate of 1,700 feet per second. Downrange distance 11 nautical miles. SRB separation, standing by for a performance call from Mission Control.
Discovery, performance, nominal.
And nominal.
Roger, nominal performance.
That's a
that
call.
Call indicates Discovery's performance was good on the first stage with the solid rocket booster performance. Now have 3 main engines up and running at 104%. 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Altitude.
Bob Bazell, we're hearing the mission control people say that it's looking good to them. I imagine it's the same to you and Al O'Hara there.
Yeah, that was really a beautiful launch because once the fog lifted here, Deborah, it's a perfectly clear day here in Florida, and we can still see the thing. If you look up in the sky, you can still see the engines burning as little pins in the sky. It was really quite a sight.
Beautiful, just beautiful launch.
Yeah. We keep hearing the word nominal from Mission Control in Houston, and of course, nominal is exactly what you people want, right?
That's right.
Nominal means normal, it means perfect, and this was a very good launch.
Interestingly enough, this is the first shuttle flight for 3 of the crewmen who are on board the Discovery shuttle. There are about 45,000 people there on the ground, along with you, Bob Bazell, and Al O'Hara watching.
That's right. There was a lot of people lined the freeways around here in Central Florida this morning in their cars, Winnebagos, and trucks. So a lot of people came out to watch the launch. It's still a big tourist attraction for a lot of people who haven't seen it. And I'll tell you, it's a great thing to come and see if you haven't seen it. Don't you agree?
Never get used to it. Every launch is different, and it's exciting.
Well, you both have pretty good seats for it, I must say. Right now, we are still at a point where the shuttle could return to the Cape. Actually, we have just passed that point at 4 minutes into the flight. The shuttle now will not be able to return back to Cape Canaveral and make an emergency landing there. It has reached the point of what they call negative return, which means it must continue on across the Atlantic.
Well, Deborah, what's happened is that starting with this mission, they have the emergency landing site across the Atlantic, as they always have had. They also have an emergency landing site in Bermuda, which is a new thing that's programmed into the computer. There's 3 possible emergencies from now on until the in the next hour or so till they get into orbit securely. If they were to lose one of the main engines, they could come back to Bermuda, they could land in Morocco, or they could go once around the world and land in New Mexico, this time at Northrop Airstrip in White Sands, New Mexico. None of that, of course, seems to be happening at the perfect flight, but those are the contingency plans that are worked out.
This is what Shuttle Chief Dick Buchli said is really an absolutely vital mission to the shuttle program. NASA has a goal of getting a shuttle up once a month as of 1992. It's important that this mission go as planned and that this tracking satellite, which you mentioned earlier, be successfully deployed.
Well, that's true, Deborah. This is a tough year for NASA because they're going to try to get 7 missions off. And if this one hadn't gone this week, and it was already almost a month late, they would have possibly had to bring it off the pad because there's another mission that goes in April, which is a planetary spacecraft that's going to go to Venus off the shuttle. If that hadn't gone off, that has to go in a very narrow window. So they were under a lot of pressure here, but they got it off. Al, do you think they're talking about 7 missions this year? One time, of course, a long time ago, NASA was talking about 20 missions a year. Do you think this 7 missions is a realistic goal?
It's going to be very close, but I think it's achievable if everything falls in place. And as you said, Bob, this is a year that the scientists are going to gain so much information from the 2 interplanetary missions. And, of course, the end of the year with the Space Telescope, it's got to be the most exciting mission of the last few years for everyone.
The Space Telescope will be fantastic. Deborah?
Bob, there are 5 people who are on board the Shuttle Discovery, and while we wait for the next important stage in this flight, let's take a look at who they are. The commander of the ship is Michael Coates, who was the pilot on Discovery before. He Discovery back in 1984 on its maiden voyage. He's been an astronaut since 1979. Interestingly enough, Judy Resnick was on that flight of Discovery with him. The pilot of the ship is John Blaha. This is his first flight in space, though he did fly a number of missions of combat in Vietnam. He's been an astronaut since 1980. Mission Specialist Dr. James Bagian. This is also his first flight. He's been an astronaut since 1981. He will be working along with Mission Specialist Robert Springer to help deploy that tracking and data relay satellite that we've been speaking about. This is his first flight. Mission Specialist James Buchli is also on the flight. This is his 3rd shuttle mission. He was a mission specialist on the first Department of Defense flight, which got off the ground in January of 1985. He was also part of the West German shuttle flight mission, which was back in November of 1985. Also on board is mission specialist Robert Springer. This is his first space flight. He'll be working to help deploy that tracking and data relay satellite. He has been very involved in the redesign and certification review of the space shuttle since the Challenger disaster in January of 1986. We're right now about 7.5 minutes into the flight of the Challenger. The next important moment comes about 1 minute from now when the external tank will separate the large tank, which is actually, from your point of view, on top of the shuttle. The shuttle, of course, travels in an upside-down position. The astronauts are basically on their back as they're proceeding across the Atlantic Ocean. They're at an altitude of about 58 miles above the Earth. The main engine will be cutting off at about 8:33, 8 minutes and 33 seconds into the flight. Everything seems to be going smoothly. We've heard nothing to the contrary from NASA Control. Bob?
Well, that's absolutely true. This mission is working exactly according to plan, and it may be that the shuttle program, do you think, is going to get on the point where it will become routine? Do you think shuttles will ever become routine? There was a lot of talk about that before Challenger.
I don't believe they'll ever be routine, because each one has its own characteristics. You have to be as careful with the next as you are with this one. It'll never be routine. We hope it becomes more repetitive. And we need to get back on schedule. This is the year, and things are looking very good.
Yeah, they're coming right up now on main engine cutoff. MECO is the NASA acronym for that. Okay, we have had main engine cutoff. The next milestone will be external tank separation, as you mentioned. That falls into the Indian Ocean after it burns up in small pieces. That's the only part of the shuttle that is not reusable. Deborah?
Bob, as we look at our animation that we prepared here, you see that the shuttle is actually pitching in a different attitude. This is something new with the shuttle program. The Discovery is pitching so that the astronauts on board can actually take a picture of the external tank as it falls off. There were some problems, as you'll recall, with the Atlanta space flight in December of 1988. They suspect that some pieces of the external tank, perhaps some insulation, may have come off and, in separating, damaged some of those heat-resistant tiles, which are vital to the ability of the shuttle to disavow any of the negative effects of the heat during re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. So they will be taking pictures. That'll be part of the data that is picked up during the flight, and I imagine that is something that'll be closely scrutinized. Al O'Hara can tell us more about that.
Well, that's right, Deborah. The tiles are very important, not on ascent, but on re-entry, but they usually get damaged when the shuttle goes up, and that's what happened apparently with Atlantis. It wasn't serious enough to cause any problems on re-entry, but it's something that they looked at very seriously. Now, what was the main idea about? Was it the external tank that caused the tile damage?
Well, you can't be sure. There's no photographic coverage that covers that, but they suspect that it's a cork material from the solid rocket boosters that actually peeled off and impacted the orbiter. At high velocity, just a very small object can do considerable damage to the tile. So this was inspected, all repaired. Don't expect the same problem this time.
Okay, I understand, Deborah, you're going to show us some pictures of that beautiful launch once again.
There were certainly no problems with the launch. The shuttle Discovery got off the ground at 9:57 a.m. this morning, the 28th launch of the shuttle program for NASA, and it was a picture-perfect launch after a bit of a delay this morning.
Liftoff of STS-29 as Discovery clears the tower.
Roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Mission Control, Houston. Good roll program confirmed.
Flight position when the shuttle essentially hangs from the rockets which thrusting it into the atmosphere. This is a videotape.
65%.
About 30 seconds into the launch.
Throttle up call.
This launch was delayed by nearly 2 hours of a delay because of high winds aloft and fog that was surrounding the Cape early this morning, but the fog managed to clear, and just before 10 o'clock. The shuttle was off.
Roger, go and throttle up.
Mission Control, that call means all systems are performing well as the shuttle main engines have resumed their firing at 104% of rated thrust. Relative velocity now 2,400 feet per second. Climbing at a rate of 1,700 feet per second. Downrange distance 11 nautical miles.
The shuttle has now been in the air for approximately 12 minutes. And the next order of business for the shuttle will be the deployment of a tracking and data relay satellite. That'll happen about 6 hours into the mission. You're looking at a videotape of the launch of the Discovery shuttle at approximately 9:57 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. And that was it, the Discovery launch, 28th launch of the shuttle program, the first launch for 1988, the first of what NASA plans as 7 launches of the shuttle program. This is an ambitious schedule, and it has gotten off to a fine start this morning. NBC News coverage of the shuttle Discovery flight will continue later through the day, and of course on NBC Nightly News. My thanks to my colleague Bob Bazell and Al O'Hara at Cape Canaveral in Florida this morning, and our thanks to you for watching. Stay tuned to NBC News for more developments. I'm Deborah Norville, NBC News, New York.
This has been an NBC News special report. We now rejoin the program already in progress.
Be ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-29 as Discovery clears the tower.
Roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Mission Control, Houston. Good roll program confirmed. Engines now at 65%. Standing by for the go at throttle up call.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
Roger, go at throttle up.
Mission Control, that call means all systems are performing well as the shuttle main engines have resumed their firing at 104% of rated thrust. Relative velocity now 2,400 feet per second. Climbing at a rate of 1,700 feet per second. Downrange distance 11 nautical miles.
You want that there now? You want to bring it?
SRB separation, standing by for a performance call from Mission Control.
Dan Rather, CBS News in New York. Looks like all is well as the shuttle gets
Discovery,
up
performance
and away.
nominal.
Discovery, performance nominal. Peter Van Sant and Dave Hilmers at Kennedy Space Center.
On the first stage with the solid rocket booster.
No glitches that anybody could see. Everything looks terrific.
It looks tremendous. Of course, we're waiting for the main engine cutoff, which comes about 8 minutes 32 seconds into the flight. It's at that point that they are in orbit, and we usually still have a bit of anticipation until we get that cutoff. I still have a chill that runs up my spine every time I hear go for main throttle up, which was the last command to the shuttle Challenger, and every time I hear that, I still hold my breath. What were your impressions of the launch? Things seem to be going well?
Looks perfect from here, Peter. Of course, there's a lot that goes on that we can't see or tell, but there's apparently no problems. Looks great.
12, 11,
Dave Hilmers,
10.
the mission...
We have a go for main engine start.
Core of the mission is to deliver that $100 million satellite into orbit. Tell us a bit about that satellite and why this is the first, let me say, operational mission since the space shuttle has started to fly again. We've had 2 previous space shuttle flights, but both of those were basically just to check out the system and primarily to make sure that we could get the shuttle up and down again. This time there's major work to be done out there. Tell us a bit about what that work is.
Well, Dan, actually, this is the same satellite that we deployed on STS-29 back in September. It's very much it's a very similar mission. We deployed one of these tracking and data relay satellites. We put our second one up, and this will be the third one that we have in orbit, and it will replace an alien satellite that we put up that was very similar to this back in 1983. It will increase the communications with Mission Control, put a more reliable satellite up, and it will also be used by a number of other government and civilian agencies. It actually is folded up in the payload bay, and it lies down at horizontal in the payload bay. Once it gets on orbit, then all these antennas and solar panels that you see will open up and be exposed to the sun and communicate with the ground.
And it's an enormous satellite. It's 57 feet from tip to tip with these solar panels and about 42 feet wide. It's a tremendous satellite, which they say will dramatically improve communication between space and Earth. On your typical 90-minute orbit, they'll be able to talk to the shuttle crew now for about 80 of those minutes. So it'll be just about 10 minutes where they're in the dark. And that's a big improvement over what they do today. They'll also be able to shut down all these ground stations around the world and save about $30 million a year once these satellites get up and get operated.
Dave Hilmers, as we watch the replay again of the shuttle's apparently perfect launch, what goes through the astronaut's mind when the shuttle reaches about this stage? You have this tremendous power underneath you and the tremendous challenge ahead.
Well, at this point in first stage, as we call it, when you're on the solid rocket boosters, you're really kind of along for the ride.
It turned out on our flight on STS-26 that we had an alarm that went off about 15 seconds after liftoff, and that certainly got our attention. I remember trying to grab for my checklist and getting it. It was some effort. You're shaking around quite a bit. There's a tremendous roar in your helmet, and you're doing your best to revert back to your many thousands of hours of training, in which you automatically went to a checklist and did the procedure.
SRB ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-29 as Discovery clears the tower.
Roll ground.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Mission Control.
This again, a replay of the liftoff. For those of you who may have joined us late, or for those of you who, like so many of us here, really like to see it again and again, that no matter how many times you've seen it, keeping in mind from a historical standpoint that we're still just on the very front edge of the exploration of space, that no matter how many times you see it, it does, as Peter Van Sant says, give you a tinkle. Now, this is downrange, some 500 miles now. We're 7+ minutes from liftoff, and all is well with this launch of the space shuttle. Discovery originally was set for a liftoff February 18th in what NASA had hoped to be a very active year, 1989, for the shuttle. But the launch has been postponed 4 times by the need to replace faulty or suspect engine parts. Here again, the liftoff.
Ignition and liftoff of STS-29 as Discovery.
Shuttle Chief Richard Truly said the success of this mission is, and I quote him now, absolutely vital to NASA's continued recovery from the Challenger accident and the agency's move towards safe, routine, once a month shuttle launches by 1992. Reminding that the whole idea of the space shuttle was to make it kind of a space truck, which could routinely go up and down, in and out of space. And that's what the shuttle was developing into until the tragic explosion of Challenger, and who can forget it? And each time the shuttle goes up now, it is, in effect, a kind of living monument to those brave astronauts who were in the Challenger when it exploded. NASA's goal in 1989 is to get the shuttle back to the point where it makes routine flights in and out of space. Following this flight, if it's successful, as we all pray that it is, the 1989 shuttle schedule lists the launch of the Magellan probe to Venus in April, then some secret Defense Department payloads in July and August, then the Galileo mission to Jupiter in October, a communications satellite in November, and the Space Telescope to be launched in December.
No action required.
What you're seeing is a replay of the solid rocket boosters dropping away from the shuttle as it went up on its successful launch. We mentioned that if all goes according to schedule, that the Space Telescope will be launched aboard shuttle in December. And keep in mind that that Space Telescope will afford man the opportunity to see more of the cosmos than has ever been seen before in history. That's where the shuttle program is headed for in December, if all goes as we hope it does, that this third launch of the space shuttle since the Challenger disaster today, up and away and apparently successful. Those are among the things we can look forward to. The Magellan probe to Venus in April, the Galileo mission to Jupiter in October, and the launching of the Space Telescope in December. Michael Collins, review for us very quickly. The probe to Venus will be designed to accomplish what?
Well, to learn about the next planet in closer to the sun. It's an extraordinarily hot planet, a planet with an extraordinary dense atmosphere and a greenhouse effect that is thousands of times as powerful as the greenhouse effect here on Earth. And it'd be fascinating to discover some of the differences and some of the similarities between the evolution of a planet like Venus and our own Earth.
And Dave Hilmers, down in Florida, the Galileo mission to Jupiter in October will be designed to accomplish primarily what?
Well, again, we're going to investigate the planet of Jupiter. We'll have 2 parts to it. There'll be an orbiter, which actually orbits around the planet, and a probe, which will go down to the surface. We don't really know what the composition of that surface is, and the probe will probably not make it all the way down because of the high pressures involved. But we hope to find out much more about that mysterious planet.
probes to Venus and to Jupiter coming up later this year if all goes well. Peter Van Sant, let's review what's happening aboard this space shuttle mission. Discovery up there, apparently all going well. Its main mission to deliver that $100 million satellite into orbit. What's happening right now?
We have had main engine cutoff, which means things are going extremely well. The shuttle is heading up towards its orbit of 184 miles above the equator, which is very good to launch this satellite in about 6 hours from now. You mentioned the Hubble telescope, Dan, which is literally going to reveal some of the secrets of the universe once they get it into space. It has been sitting in a warehouse for years. The Challenger accident set that project back. But they needed to get the TDRS satellite up so it could process the data and send it back down to Earth. So this mission is very critical in terms of the Hubble telescope. This mission is also, I want to mention, a confidence builder for NASA. They've had reliability problems and concerns that way. And so this is a real confidence builder for them that they've managed to get Discovery up, and Atlantis comes next month.
And so we haven't confused you, we're talking about some of the flights to come later in the year, provided everything goes well. The exploration around Venus, the exploration around Jupiter, and then that tremendous space telescope to be launched in December. So let's hope and pray that all of this Discovery mission goes well. Once again, let's take a look and listen to today's launch on replay.
6, 5, we have main engine start. 3, 2, 1. SRB ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-29 as Discovery clears the tower.
Roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Mission Control, Houston. Good roll program confirmed.
And so, Shuttle Discovery's crew of 5 leave behind the fog and the wind way down below to begin what we hope will be their 5 days in space up above, the first space shuttle flight of 1989. We will, of course, keep you up to date as the mission goes along. We'll have full coverage tonight on the CBS Evening News. For now, with Peter Van Sant, Dan Rather, we'll see you later.
Rise, we have main engine start. 3, 2, 1. SRB ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-29 as Discovery clears the tower.
Mission Control.
This is CBS.
Crew going to their normal post-landing switch changes now, configuring the spacecraft after touchdown. Convoy moving out to the area of the spacecraft. Cooling vehicles will begin servicing the spacecraft. Large wind machines moving up in the vicinity of the spacecraft to blow away any residual dangerous gases, exhaust from auxiliary power units, other gases from the propellants on board that are hazardous, blowing those out of the vicinity. Be performing an engineering evaluation or engineering test on the auxiliary power units prior to egressing the vehicle. Service teams pulling up to the orbiter to provide
cooling for the spacecraft, taking over from the Orbiter Discovery's cooling systems, so that the heat of entry does not dissipate back into the orbiter and damage some of the delicate electronics.